Hello, this is Bert Filemyr, a longtime member of the Delaware Valley Ornithological Club, DVOC. This presentation was presented to the club in September 2022. It was our first meeting back, in-person meeting back after the pandemic. It was not recorded at that time. Now in July 2024, I am recording it so it can go up on the website. This presentation is about chasing birds, my thoughts and my tales. It's kind of a personal reflection. I've been asked to talk about some of my chases, and that was the impetus for this presentation. As I put together this presentation, I was struck by the quote from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, "Come, Watson, come," he cried. "The game is afoot, not a word. Into your clothes and come." Truer words are never spoken. "Come, Watson," he cried. These are going to be thoughts about chasing birds and tales about the chases. I'm going to try to intermix those two things and try to emphasize why I chase, thoughts about chasing, and then tales about chasing. What is a chase? What is a birding chase? On one level, a birding chase is an adventurer whose success depends on seeing one or more specific species. That was kind of a working thought of mine, but the more I thought about it, all I can say, not really. What is a chase about? A chase is about places you would never go to otherwise. People you would never meet otherwise. And birds that you would not see if you did not make an effort to see them. A chase can be local or distant. It can be planned or a spur of the moment. A chase can be solo or with multiple people, that is, traveling with people or joining them at the chase location. It can or cannot involve live birds. The mode of transportation can vary. Usually it's motorized of some sort because you're covering distances. And it's very often associated with listing. And it can be for a resident bird or a vagrant. Why do I chase? And that's a good question. Why do I chase? I chase because I enjoy it. Hard to define why I enjoy it, but I enjoy it. What allows me to chase? Primarily my wife, Leslie, who is supportive of my chases, and we have traveled many places together, but she has never really been on a chase trip with me. Another thing that allows me to chase is our son, Edward. Our son, Edward, is a commercial airline pilot, and he flies right now for United Airlines, which gives me some privileges on United Airlines. Previous to that, he flew for American Airlines, and I had privileges on American Airlines. I can fly non-revenue standby. If there's an unoccupied seat on a flight, a United Airlines flight, I can occupy it as a guest of the airline by paying taxes and fees that the airline might occur. It's an option. It's not always possible. I do not have a ticket until they find out the last minute whether a seat's available, and I can end up not getting on flights or what have you. It's a good option for a return flight. It's a terrible option if I'm trying to meet someone someplace or the bird is getting itchy and I don't think it's going to stay. 6 rules for chasing. First rule, go as soon as you can. Second rule, see rule number 1. Third rule, see rule number 1. Fourth rule, stay as long as you can. 5, see rule number 4. 6, see rule number 4. So the bottom line is, go it as soon as you can, and stay as long as you can, assuming that you haven't seen the bird. My first memory of a real chase was chasing a snowy owl at the Allentown Bethlehem Easton Airport in 1990. This is not the actual bird from that day. At that time, I was not doing photography, so some of these early chase birds pictures are of birds that I have seen later. But that was my first chase. Someone told me there was a snowy owl at the airport. I drove up there, went to the observation deck, saw the bird at a distance. It was a chase. Probably my earliest chase, though, was my family and I were camping in Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado on a summer camping trip. And I was aware of all the birds around me. And then this guy showed up. A Western tanager flew in, landed on the tree right beside me, and then flew off. I grabbed my binoculars, chased it down the campsite road, and I've kind of been chasing birds ever since. My first chase with that involved an airplane was in 1997 when I flew up with several other people to see an ivory gull in Portland, Maine. A memorable experience, great views of that bird. Of course, one showed up in Cape May, New Jersey in 2009 and gave us wonderful views. Here are some local chases which, in the Philadelphia area, you don't have to go around the world or around the country to chase a bird. Blackback oriole up near Reading in 2017. A bar-tailed godwit at Forsyth in May of 2014. Common greenshank, October 2017. And a gray-breasted martin in Brooklyn, New York in April 2021. Just 4 birds, local chases. Here are some other ones. Northern wheatear up at the Corte Park in New Jersey. That one I actually chased all the way up to Connecticut because there was one up in Connecticut and I spent several hours looking for it, did not find it, and then I found out this one was being seen in New Jersey. I drove down that same afternoon and saw this bird. Might have been the same bird. White-winged tern, first seen at Ted Harvey Wildlife Management area. This bird, the picture was taken in northern Pennsylvania of a white-winged tern. Whiskered tern, Cape May, New Jersey. I remember that one distinctly. I'd come off a round of golf and was sitting in the bar enjoying an adult beverage, and I got the text message that the whiskered tern was in Cape May, and I just said to the guys I was having an adult beverage with, I said, I'm out of here, and I left. I hope one of the guys covered my bar tab. Barnacle goose, Cape May, New Jersey. Of course, a barnacle goose showed up in other places more recently in Philadelphia. LeConte sparrow, Bombay hook in 2002. Sharp-tailed sandpiper, Salem, New Jersey on the sod farms in 2003. Fork-tailed flycatcher, June 2006, Bucks County. Curlew sandpiper at Heislerville. And a wood sandpiper at Prime Hook back in 2008, even though there's one more recently up at the Corte. The bottom line of all this is you don't have to really go great distances if you're willing to chase rare birds. You can see some great rare birds within a short air distance of Philadelphia. These are some locations of chases which are a little further away, which I drove to, and a little more of a description of a chase via auto, all the way up to Quebec and as far south as, of course, down to Cape May. The missile thrush up in Canada, more about that later in the presentation. The redwing in New Hampshire. Common cuckoo in Rhode Island. the Stellar Sea Eagle in Maine, January 1st, 2022. What a bird. Terex Sandpiper, Rhode Island. Common gull, which was a split from the mew gull up in Connecticut. They're still probably up there. Brambling, coming to a feeder out in Ohio in 2016. The red-footed falcon in 2004. We got up there to see that. Several of us got up there. Involved a ferry ride out to the island. I think we were the last day it was seen. And the social flycatcher in Texas. Now, what jumps out at this is you say, well, that's not really an auto ride to Texas. But I was in Austin, Texas over Thanksgiving, and the day after Thanksgiving, it was really rainy, and we was looking for things to do with the family, and they had plans, and I said, I think I'll take a ride down to all the way down to Brownsville, Texas, and see the social flycatcher. It was about 7 hours each way driving, but it was certainly worth it, and it was a memorable trip. Other notable trips via auto: common shelduck, black-tailed godwit, red-necked stint, black-tailed gull, Eurasian kestrel, northern lapwing, great gray owl, boreal chickadee, and hoary redpoll, which may be lumped in with the regular redpolls soon, and that one might not be a kind of a chase bird anymore. But these are the notable trips I took via auto. As I mentioned, I could fly standby, so I did some very quick chases sometimes via airplanes. Now, you have to remember, this is not ticketed, so I'd go to the airport not knowing if I was going to get on a flight. And once I was there, I was at the airport not knowing when I would get home. I always assumed I would get home. The American flamingo, more about that later in Florida. That involved flying down through Charlotte and then Tallahassee and driving down to St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge. Red-flanked bluetail in California, 2019. And as many of you know, one of them showed up in New Jersey last year. Spotted rail in Texas. More about that bird later in the presentation. The blue-footed booby out in Utah. A quick chase. And I define a quick chase means a motel was not involved. I went and then came back. Spotted redshank in Michigan. And the dark-billed cuckoo in Florida, February 2019. Birds that you can't see around here, and they haven't shown up here at all, but I could get to them. The eared quetzal, and more about that later in the presentation under tails. Siberian ancestor. Notice that was February 2020. That was literally the day or two before the world shut down with the pandemic. European golden plover in October of 2020. And the northern jacana and Berline hummingbird in Arizona. Golden crowned warbler in Texas. Thick-billed vireo in Florida. And white-throated thrush in Arizona. All birds that we can't see around here. Ones I did one-day trips for. Roadside hawk in Texas, and the red-legged thrush in Florida. Long-duration chases, which are ones that involve the motel, staying overnight, and maybe planning on chasing and then seeing other birds, included the Cassia crossbill up in Idaho, a Nazca booby, and a white wagtail in California. That picture was not by me. That's by Neil Hayward, who many of you know. The bat falcon and the blue mockingbird, Texas, New Mexico. That was one chase, but the two birds were about 12 hours by car apart. And the swallow-tailed gull, which I'll explain more about in a few minutes. Tampolitas crow at the Brownsville dump. Those birds Sometimes had for many years were consistent there, and then for many years they were not consistent. And then one year there was about 7 or 8 of them there. And I don't think they've been seen there recently at all. And one time I put together, or I was involved with people put together a chase for tufted flycatcher, fan-tailed warbler, and slate-throated redstart in Arizona. And we combined one time buff-colored nightjar and a common crane in Arizona. Yellow grosbeak, crimson-collared grosbeak were together on one trip into Arizona. Long duration chases, an oriental turtle dove in California, and then combined it with some other birds. This is a map of flights I have taken for birding purposes since 1997. I put this together kind of to let me know. I was kind of wondering how many flights I took for birding purposes. These are not family vacations. These are not ski trips. They are not trips to a dude ranch. These are birding flights I have taken simply for the purpose of birding. And you can see a well-worn path to Miami and San Antonio and Phoenix and out to the West Coast and San Francisco. So you can see that I've spent a lot of time on flights coming out of Philadelphia. And now for some tails. Western reef heron is a bird that occurs in Europe, as you can see on the right-hand side here. This is an eBird map showing the distribution of it. There's 1 or 2 records of it in North America, as you can see, just 1 or 2 records over the year. My wife and I were in Boston visiting close friends, and on Sunday, I knew the bird was up in Maine, and I casually mentioned to Les, I said, why don't we just go see this bird on the way home? Well, you can look at the map, and it's not exactly on the way home, but yes, we went up from Boston. We went up to the border of Maine and New Hampshire, and we decided we saw the bird, and then we drove home. And on the way home, I got some phone calls, and the next day, I drove back up with some friends to see it again. They wanted to go, and I had just had an opportunity to see it, so I went back up. We had to work for it the second time, and we got very distant views of it. But that was the Western reef heron, where literally on the way home from Boston, I was able to get the bird the first time. This is the story of an unexpected pelagic trip. Usually pelagic trips are planned. This one was unexpected. A blue-footed booby is a large seabird, which has a history of vagrancy, as you'll see on the left-hand side here, where there's some dots where it's been in the U.S. occasionally. And when it gets to a place, it usually has a habit of staying. It's kind of a nice chase bird, if there's one around. So in October 2018, a blue-footed booby showed up out here in Arizona, all right, near Lake Powell, kind of on the border of Utah and Arizona, Glen Canyon Dam. And you can see the reports. It was all in this one area. So that's a chaseable bird. I mean, it's there. Go for it. You can see it. Chances are it's going to be there. It was hanging out at a portable restroom that the National Park Service or Fish and Wildlife put out. They had these barges. They put them out into the lake and they anchor them. And that is your relief station. And you can dump your boat sewage there, and you can use that. And that way it keeps the environment clean. And this bird was hanging out right on the dock of this thing. That's where it was sitting most of the time. So I came up with a plan, drive out there, fly out, drive up, and there was a four-wheel drive road in the upper left-hand corner here that goes in and gets pretty close to where this bird was. And I figure I'll drive in the four-wheel drive, and I will scope it, see the bird, drive back, and make it an easy little chase trip. You can see it's kind of rough country here, and I was going to come down here and drive out through this gap, the gap over here by Warm Creek. And it was good. It was a plan. And when I got there, I decided to make a quick stop at the Bureau of Land Management contact station. And I went in and explained my plan that I was going to drive down the road and see the bird and then go home. And they said, they start off by saying, these are public lands and we cannot stop you from going. But be aware that if you get stuck in there, it's going to be a 9 to 10 hour wait for a vehicle to come in and recover your vehicle. And there's someone in there right now who's been waiting about 8 hours. And not only is the road bad, there's a major stream that you have to cross. And we've had heavy rains recently. And you might want to think about it before driving through that ford over the stream. Well, obviously, this conversation convinced me I really didn't want to drive in there and run the risk of getting stuck and getting washed away, et cetera, et cetera. So I decided, well, I'll go rent a boat. So I went down to the local marina. And the marina's there, and it's a public marina. I went down, they rent boats. And I went in and explained to the person at the counter that I wanted just to rent a boat. I needed it for 3-4 hours. I didn't need anything else. I need just a simple boat to get me out to a certain place. And I would see a bird and I would come back. And then the person at the counter said, that's no problem. You know, that's what we do here. And where is the other person who's going to go with you? I said, what? And they said, we don't rent boats to individuals. We have to have at least 2 people in a boat to rent. Well, I explained that I had come all the way across country and I didn't have another person here, and I guess I'd have to go out on the dock and try to rent a person, just wander the docks and say, who wants to go for a boat ride? Well, the lady at the counter went back and talked to the boss, and then the bottom line is I rented the boat, a solo, and I took off and I had to sign lots of papers, put lots of credit card holds on, et cetera, et cetera. And finally I was off to find the bird. And as I was driving the boat carefully, because I didn't want to mess up the boat by running aground, there's a lot of rocks there, I finally saw in the distance the washroom, this floating barge. And I could see on the corner of the barge this little dot. And I said, oh, that's the bird. But I also saw a boat showing up to use the restrooms. Not only was a boat showing up, it was a family showing up with a dog. And I was thinking, uh-oh, that bird's going to fly off. I'm going to have to sit out here for hours waiting for this bird to come back. But that bird was so used to people, the people and the dog got off. The people used the restroom. Then they get the dog and the people got back on the boat and they took off. And that bird never moved. That blue-footed booby just sat on that dock for me and gave me great views. Wonderful bird, an unexpected pelagic. The furthest I ever chased for bird or birds was up to Adak, Alaska, which is way out there. It's not quite as far as that too, but it's pretty far out. This was a chase that started, I got a phone call on a Monday afternoon that there were some good birds out there that I want to go. So a couple of people were going. And by Friday morning, I was on an airplane to Anchorage. Welcome to Adak, Alaska, birthplace of the winds. It's kind of windy there. It's an old Air Force base, and there's lots of great scenery, but there's also a whole abandoned town. At one time, there was 17,000 people on the island. As I said, it was a military base, but right now there's about a population of about 100 people. But myself and 2 other people, Liz and Laura, we went out and we went birding, and kind of a remote area. But we got hawfinch. We saw eastern spot-billed duck, which is a major bird. That's a real rarity. Common snipe, not Wilson snipe, but common snipe. Common cuckoo, which I had already seen in New Hampshire. Rock ptarmigan. whiskered auklet, which usually involves a boat ride, and there was 2 of them in the harbor one evening. Whooper swan, ancient murrelet, great birds, a great trip up to Adak. We were going about a week. Another tale. If at first you don't succeed. In August and September 2020, there was an eared quetzals, actually 2 of them, in southern Arizona, and there was a plain-capped starthroat, which is a hummingbird in southern Arizona. And I figured I could combine the 2 of them and do one trip. And so off I went and flew into Phoenix, picked up a car, drove down to Patton Centers in Patagonia, and there was the plain-capped starthroat putting on a show, and that was wonderful. And then back up to the Chiricahuas, up at Portal, and looking for the quetzals. And we knew where they had been seen, and I spent 2 days driving around with a couple other people, trying to communicate, trying to find these birds. And we knew all the places they had been seen, but it was not seen when we were there. Some other great things to look at up there, of course, in the Chiricahuas. You can't go wrong in southern Arizona. But we did not get the quetzals, and finally it was time to go. Late on the day I left, and I didn't get this report until I got home, there was a report of a pair of these eared quetzals in another canyon down in Arizona. So don't know whether it was the same birds that were over near Portal, but there was another report, but I was at home. So 2 weeks later, late on a Friday afternoon, I took a flight into Phoenix again, got in the car, drove down to the canyon, spent the night in Hotel Honda in a Walmart parking lot, and I was on the trail at 5:30 a.m. going up into Rucker Canyon Recreation Area. This was my path. I parked the car here, and I walked up, and this was the hot spot. This is where these birds had been seen, and that's where there was many birders there, or several birders, hanging out, looking at it for the bird. After about 6 hours, the question is, what's going to be the best strategy? I mean, no bird, sitting there looking. We knew it was there, had been there, and I kept wandering from the spot up the canyon, sometimes straight up the wall and coming back down, which was an adventure, looking for the bird, just trying to spread out. It's always a question of what is the best strategy. Some friends that were there, they thought the best strategy was to give up for 3 hours and go into town and get lunch. Now, I didn't go for that. And then sometime early afternoon, a couple of guides went through, Roseanne Roulette and Dick Webster, walked through, and we talked to them, and they went up the canyon. They were out birding. They had seen the quetzals over in the other place. But about noon or 1 o'clock, a distant voice we could hear shouting to us, "If you're looking for the quetzals, they are 10 minutes walk up the trail." So they had gone up and found them, and they were nice enough. They came back to tell us where they were. Well, their definition of 10 minutes was not the same as mine, but you go up the trail. It's one trail up the canyon. You can't go wrong, and you can see it was pretty far up. But sure enough, we went up, and there was a small group up there, and the quetzals were up there. So got great views of it. Drove back to Phoenix. Caught a later flight, a red eye coming out of Phoenix, and was home by 8 o'clock Saturday morning. So it was a quick turnaround. I came on Sunday morning, not Saturday morning. Another quick trip, spotted rail, which I had tried to see down in Panama and Mexico one time. Here's a range map of it, spotted rail. One showed up down here at Choke Canyon State Park in Texas. All right, that's doable. Fly into San Antonio, drive down. I know some people down there. I could get good information. So drove down, great expectation of seeing this bird and everything. And I get down there to the location, and there's lots of people standing around looking and lots of habitat. If you're looking for a marsh bird, there's a lot of marsh there, thousands of acres. But the bird was pretty good because it stayed in the same area it had been. Finally, it showed, and I got great looks at it, spotted rail. And then I wrapped that up after that and went back to, drove back to the airport, jumped on a flight and came home. Sometimes there's no need to rush on a chase. November 9th in 2018, I decided to go to St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge in Florida, where a American flamingo had taken up residence. American flamingos at one time were very difficult to find in the ABA area. Your best bet was somewhere down in Key West, down in the Everglades, actually, down the Everglades, trying down there, but that was not a given. But this one in St. Mark's was there, had been there. It was a pretty easy trip. Philadelphia to Charlotte, Charlotte to Tallahassee, rental car, drive down. The bird was right there, boom. Had to walk out of, out in the poundments in the heat, but that's okay. Great views of it. Of course, it should be noted two things. Number one is that bird, which I chased down for it, is still there. I mean, that bird has been down there for years once it got to that place and stayed there. And it's been there ever since. And recently, last year, there was the great influx of flamingos in the eastern part of the U.S., which made kind of this chase seem mute. But you didn't know that was going to happen. You never know. All right, this is a chase for a swallowtail gull, and all I can say is damn technology. September 2017, swallowtail gull, which is a gull more of the Galapagos out in that area, you can see from the range map here. There was a report of one, and a good report, up in the Seattle area. And it was moving around, considerably moving around, up and down the beach in a range of about 20 miles. Excuse me. Several of us thought about going for it, but we waited for it to settle down, and finally we said, we can't see it at home. We got to go. So off we went, flew into Seattle, and people came in from various locations around the country, and we met there. And it was at a place called Gull Point Wells, and the bird was up here at the top end of this picture, and the parking was down at the bottom end of the picture. So you had to park and then walk out along this beach on the left-hand side of this picture and walk all the way around this refinery with chain link fences up to where you could finally see it. But we did, we knew the information, and it was kind of decided that I would be the source of information. So I had all the maps on the phone, all my contact information, everything I needed to make this happen. And so we flew into Seattle, SeaTac, and you're probably all familiar with this piece of equipment, which is a thing for hanging a cell phone on a car. And you clip your phone into it, you clip it into the vent, and that's where your phone, and you can see all your information. So I had one of them, and we hopped in the rental car, and I was navigating, another person was driving, and we had a couple of people in the back seat assisting the back seat driving. And we jumped in, I put the phone into this holder, and somehow I managed to hit the wrong set of buttons or clip it in bad, or I'm not sure what I did. I'll never know what I did. But as we sat there, and as I started to retrieve the information about where to go, the phone did a full factory reboot. It shut down. Everything got wiped out. It was like I had gone to the store and gotten a new phone. I was not logged into anything. I had no maps, nothing, no contacts, no nothing. I had a new phone. And of course, we're driving up the interstate at speed. People were saying, well, where's the turn? And I'm saying, I don't know. So we recovered. I logged into this and found this and did the best I could. But we recovered. And we parked, walked up, and saw the swallowtail gull. It was in with some other ones, distinctive bird, great bird. As we were sitting there or standing there admiring the bird because we had come all the way across country, we started to realize there was less and less people watching the gull. We started out with a group of about 20 people, and now we were down to about 5. And we were wondering where everyone went. What did they know we didn't know? Well, the fact is that there's a narrow beach along this edge here between where it says beach north of Point Wells and Point Wells. And at low tide, it's very walkable. At high tide, it's not. The beach disappears and there's nothing but a seawall of large rocks. And the tide was coming in and everybody had left because they knew the tide was coming in and they did not mention it. But we recovered. We hustled down and we got some wet feet and wet legs, but we got across the beach before the tide wiped us out, and we got back down to our parking spot. And we're grateful that we didn't get trapped in for 12 hours on the tide. This is the area where we had, the worst part was right here in the upper part of this picture where this was taken actually at a low tide where you can see a beach, but there's no beach there at high tide. And of course, now we recovered and we did the logical thing. Since we recovered, we had the bird. We went out for some adult beverages and we took over kind of an outdoor area in a bar. And these are some of the little team picture from this chase. And these are some of the higher listers and chase people. You might recognize some of these people. Good friends of mine, people I've chased with, and I hope to chase with again in the future. Not every chase works. I'm talking about chases where everything worked. This one didn't. Green-breasted mango, which is a hummingbird, was one being seen down in the Corpus Christi area. And it coming into feeders, came in for 2 or 3 days. So off I went. And I spent 2 days of watching feeders in the Texas heat. All right, and humidity. I got there, I was down there by early morning because I took a real early flight out of Philadelphia. I was down there, spent one whole day in the heat. It was brutal, watching things, but not the hummingbird. And took a motel that night, and then went back the next day. And finally, there's a limit, and I left about 1:30 p.m. to start the process of getting home because I wanted to get, I knew what the flights were like, and I was flying standby. And while waiting in the airport at 4:30, I get a text message and a picture. The bird showed up. The bird showed up about 4:30. I was long gone. Some people stayed, people who had actually gotten there after I did. It showed up. Unfortunately, I couldn't get back before dusk. So I took a 6:30 flight from home. I was home about 2 a.m. on Saturday morning. Didn't see the bird. And that was the final sighting of the hummingbird. It was never seen again. It was one 20-second visit to that feeder after going missing for about 48 hours. Not seen again. So that was a miss. Sometimes things go unexpected. Tundra bean goose, which is a Asian bird and European bird, showed up out at Findlay National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. Good bird, great bird. A couple of us arranged to meet, and off we went, and we got out there, and with a little bit of work, we found the Tundra bean goose. Great bird, good tick. I don't want to say easy chase because they're not easy, but it was a very fulfilling chase. It was a little difficult sometimes to pick it out of a mass of Canada geese, but we did. And on the way home, on the flight home, I found out that the great black hawk was being seen up in Maine. So the great black hawk is a southern bird down in Central and South America, but it was being seen up in Maine. So what I did was I flew into Philadelphia, looked at the flight schedules. I was able to fly standby, never left the airport, flew standby up to Portland or Boston. I guess I flew into Boston on that one. Flew into Boston, drove up, saw the Black Hawk, Deering Oaks Park, and then drove back down to Boston and flew home, kind of the same day. A good, unexpected, absolutely unexpected two bird chase. Now, it should also be noted that I went all the way out to the West Coast to see that bean goose, and it showed up a year or two ago at the Springfield Country Club in Springfield County, Pennsylvania, and I actually spent some time on the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia. So it can happen. You never know where they're going to go, but it was worth going. And the missel thrush is a bird from Europe, and one showed up in Canada. And we were debating whether to do it and debating on phone calls and text messages. And we said, why not? And so I had two friends fly into Philadelphia. I met them at the Philadelphia airport, picked them up, and drove up to New Brunswick to see this bird. We drove up overnight. We shared the driving. We shared where Starbucks were and all kinds of things. We got there about 8 a.m. and sure enough, a little bit of looking, we found the bird. Great bird, good views, good time. Weather was not bad. It was kind of in the winter, but not bad. And then on the way home, we got the word that a loggerhead kingbird had shown up in a park just south of Miami. And we started talking on the way home. Well, what are you doing when we get back? Well, I don't know. I'm not doing anything planned. What are you doing? I don't know. And we decided that what we would do is when we got back to Philadelphia, we'd go to Miami. And so we drove back to Philadelphia and got to my house about 3:30 in the morning on December 31st. Got cleaned up and we're on an 8 o'clock a.m. flight to Miami. Picked up a rental car and drove down to where it had been seen. And it had not been seen for an hour when we got there. And it was never seen again. So we had gone from Philadelphia up to New Brunswick, to Philadelphia, down to Miami. And then all three of us went home, different flights because we were in different parts of the country. And it was one of those things, why not? We had some frequent flyer miles and we could do it. And we did. Again, the bird was never seen again. Still need that one. I was home by about 1:30 a.m. on New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day, if you want to count it that way. For those keeping score at home, that trip was 54.5 hours, 28 hours of driving, 1,650 miles driving, 2,026 air miles, 6 hours on an airplane, 2 countries, and 1 chase bird that we saw. So to start to wrap things up here, what is a chase about? It's about the people. It's the friendships you establish and maintain and the camaraderie of the chase. It's the places, whether it's a stuck automobile on a muddy road in Texas or a really dramatic spot in the Colorado mountains. It's takes you places that you would not normally go. And the birds that you would not normally see around here, but there's always a chance something like a flamingo will show up here after chasing it. So a chase is about people, places, and birds. it's worth talking about the elephant in the room because some people are probably saying to themselves, boy, that's a big carbon footprint to do this. Well, there's an element to the carbon footprint, yes. First of all, if you're flying on an airplane, the airplane's going to go whether you're on it or not. And that's not really a thing. Yes, the real carbon footprint is in the automobile, the rental car, and that's one of the reasons why we always try to share expenses and try to get as many people involved. But there is a factor, there is a thought that there's a carbon footprint to doing this, but there's a carbon footprint to just about everything in life. Thoughts on chasing. Let me give you my final thoughts. You have to decide to chase with others or go solo. Sometimes it's nice to go with other people or meet other people, but if you go solo, you have the ability to be flexible. If you're flying, only carry on luggage. Never check luggage if you're chasing a bird. You don't want to get hassled by not getting your suitcase through or waiting for luggage. Be flexible. Things change. Travel plans change. Weather changes. If you can do a chase trip with 2 target birds, it's nice because then your odds go up. Know the policies. And what I mean by this is know what the policy is of the airline as to canceling or changing flights. Know what the policy is for a hotel if you're making a reservation, when you can cancel. Know the policies of frequent flyers and always know the policies. And understand the situation. Was it a flyby or a one-time sighting? Was the bird in suitable habitat that will hold it? And of course, get every bit of local knowledge and sharing of information that you can. A chase is not a trip to the zoo. There's no guarantee you will see a bird if you chase. But if you stay at home, there's a guarantee you will not see the bird. There's no such thing as a sure thing when it comes to chasing birds. If you want a sure thing, take up geology. There's various resources that have constantly changing over the years, but if you're going to chase birds, you want to know all about eBird alerts, NORBA, birding news, Facebook, text groups, and of course personal contacts. Can't go wrong with personal contacts. And you birders share information. That's what we do. I thank this list of some of my chase friends, people who I have chased with, and you might recognize some of the names on here. But these are some of the people I have chased with over the years, all good friends that we've shared experiences with, and I look forward to most of them sharing experiences in the future. Well, when is my next chase? Don't know. Come, Watson, come. The game is afoot. I don't know when the next chase will be. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be in a month. But I guarantee there will be another chase. You can direct any thoughts, questions, and or comments to me, Bert Filemyr, at afilemyr@comcast.net. Again, this was presented to the Delaware Valley Ornithological Club in September 2020, and I recorded it in July 2024. I thank you for watching and listening, and let me know if you have any comments.